Hi. Hi, everyone.
You want a pillow behind your back?
No, good. Thank you.
You can't for sharing?
No,
Mr. Reynolds.
I want to look at the, otherwise I don't understand the word.
Oh.
It's okay.
Okay, does everybody know everyone more or less?
I don't think so.
All right.
I don't think everyone knows me.
I'm Alan Saley. I'm
My
on the
husband.
board of the New York Region Pathwork. And I've been a student of the Pathwork for most of my life, ever since I was more or less about 16. And I'm very pleased to have this discussion about lecture 257 this evening. So thanks for coming, everyone. Margaret Mary, I could see Margaret.
Yeah.
Hi, I just wanted to say hi.
Her
I was
husband.
only here once before in your group, and my husband and I, Farrell Reynolds down. I don't know if everybody
Thanks
can
for
see.
coming. Thank you very much. Well, hopefully everyone's read the lecture. Have you guys read it?
And that's this.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
Hi,
yes.
Deborah. Hi, Kay.
And
so-
then Teresa's here.
Alan.
She's
Hi, Teresa.
no picture. Rita said she would keep.
Hello.
All right, anyway, just to get started here,
Any extra copies?
I didn't bring copies today because I don't have to go into the office most days, and I don't have a Xerox machine at home.
All right,
So
go ahead.
there we are.
We'll go back.
I've got it memorized anyway, so it's not a problem.
Well, this lecture was the second to last lecture that was given. And it's called Aspects of the New Divine Influx, Communication, Group Consciousness, Exposure. This lecture first talks about the concept of the New Age, which the guide makes an important point in the second paragraph, that any phrase tends to kind of lose its meaning and its value, become a cliche. So the guide kind of invites us to consider what this concept New Age looks like, Age of Aquarius. But he does say it's a time where there's a interpenetrating of spiritual energies, divine energies, especially the Christ consciousness at this time in human history. He puts forward a couple of familiar concepts. That's the first familiar concepts he puts forward on page 1. Secondly, he says in the fourth paragraph, you believe that what is good and right at this moment will also ultimately be good and right. You believe that what may appear evil to you now is also ultimately evil. This is hardly the case. This is often brought forward in the lectures, that appearances may be deceiving. For example, let's say that somebody gets into an accident, a car accident, looks really bad. Maybe you're injured. Then you wind up in the hospital and you manage to think about aspects of your life, and perhaps you decide to go in a different career path. Maybe you read a lot. I'm reminded of Thomas Mann and The Magic Mountain. And you somehow have a deeper experience of life and you think to yourself, hey, maybe that accident was not really so bad after all. So it's frequently talked about in the lectures, this whole idea that you can't take life circumstances and make a snap judgment about whether they are positive or negative. Something that appears positive, in other words, you could get into a relationship with somebody that is basically taking an easy road where you don't have to confront anything, you think you're in a good space, and then years later you say, this was a mistake. So, I mean, I guess those are just two examples I thought up. The idea that what appears to be good may not really be good. What appears to be evil may not really be evil. Then the guide introduces the central theme of the lecture, which is communication. He says, communication is a byproduct of highly developed consciousness. So the guide is sort of saying that if you're conscious that one has a duty to communicate, one has a duty to do the hard work of communication. That's what mostly this lecture is about. It's about the fact that communication is not necessarily easy, but it has to take place because you're trying to develop your consciousness. He says on the second page, communication presupposes communication with the self. Understanding the self is the groundwork, the foundation. So There we go. The Socratic imperative, right? Know thyself. If you don't know yourself, you can't really share who you are. If you can't encounter yourself, then you can't really encounter other people. Now he talks about the art of communication. The great art of communication, he calls it. This requires intention, thought, practice, self-observation. It means giving up the state of being only half awake, assuming unthinkingly that others should know what you feel. And I'm the director of communication for transit. And when I talk to all these union guys, I tell them, people don't really know what you're thinking. People don't know what you want. You've got to tell them. So the first imperative of communication is to believe and to know that other people don't necessarily get what you're thinking. They don't get where you're going. You have to make the effort to explain, to reach out, to search through the mazes of misunderstanding patiently and lovingly. So that, I think, is a good phrase to summarize the lecture, because when there's a breakdown in communication, what it means is that usually people do not take that time to sort through the quote mazes of misunderstanding patiently and lovingly. And it's also said often that, there's my truth and there's your truth, but the real truth is somewhere in the middle. But the guide says that's not the case. The guide says that there's actually only one truth. And that if you are able to be very honest with yourself, and the person you're communicating with is able to also be very honest, then the two of you will arrive at the truth, or your interaction, or whatever issue you are trying to examine. And the guide also says that when you reveal yourself, on the next page, I'm sorry, I skipped a page. Yeah, I've got to go back to page 2 because it was a double-sided paper. A very important paradox is introduced on page 2, which is very key to understanding the Pathwork perspective, that any interaction is conducted on a positive level. The higher selves of the two people that are involved are always interacting, even if it appears to be negative. And I think that this is a Gandhian concept also. Gandhi had the concept of not resisting the evil of the aggressor. And when you put yourself in harm's way, it may appear that you are being hurt, let's say, the way that Gandhi confronted the British and the way that the Indian people were protesting peacefully, but were abused. There's an interaction there that in some way, the positive higher selves of both parties interacted. Now, I know that really seems paradoxical. The negativity exists for the purpose of dissolving it. Maybe we can talk about this a little bit later, but it's a very important concept in the Pathwork, that there is no interaction in which the positive selves of both parties are not actually being active.
Fantastic.
And obviously, a negative charge or a negative act creates its own remedy, a resolution, ultimately. So we have to talk about that. He says, underneath the lower self-exchange, a higher self-exchange exists simultaneously between the entities in conflict. Just imagine two people or groups are at war on the surface. They hate and accuse each other. They wish each other the worst and want to harm each other. At the same time, on a deeper level, these entities agree. They know that what occurs on the surface serves the common good, serves truth and loves, serves their unity. And the guide also makes a very deep and profound point here, right after that, that this sequence of conflict, first the hate, then the search for truth, then love and unity. It seems to be a sequence, but on a deeper level, there are no such sequences. Truth, love, and unity always exist simultaneously. So an apparent conflict contains somehow within it the seeds of unity, or also the unity exists at the same time. That's really something to think about, ponder. I mean, I know it's true, but it's paradoxical. So let me go back to the earlier theme, the theme of having to reveal yourself, having to be honest in order for communication to take place. He says, if you explain yourself in a way that implies blame and accusation, you only create a bigger wall. But if you attempt to explain yourself by simply conveying your feelings and needs, your impressions and assumptions in a questioning and open spirit, without insisting that they be the truth, then you can reach a true understanding. So, in order to communicate, you have to be willing to confront yourself, and you have to be willing to reveal yourself, positive and negative. I mean, I must say that it was probably the deepest experience I've had in the Pathwork when we had our Pathwork groups back in the center in Phoenicia. And you'd have a couple people come into an encounter group with Saturday night group, and they would be full of hate. And the more they would dish their hate out, their anger, the more you would feel close to them. Because the more you'd think, hey, you know what? I can relate to this. I know how the guy feels. I feel that way too. And when the people were honest enough to express their anger, then a magical thing happened where suddenly they felt united and they felt close. So, I mean, to take this into the world of politics or the world that we have here, if somebody would express a desire, let's say, I was just thinking myself, of the fact that the state of Wyoming is suing states that won't accept the coal that they produce because they don't want their livelihood to be taken away. But of course, we all know that coal is being phased out because it promotes greenhouse gases. But so it seems like the positions of the folks that don't want Wyoming to mine the coal and the people in Wyoming who want to mine and sell the coal are diametrically opposed. But I was thinking that if the folks in Wyoming would express not the fact that they want to harm the earth, but the fact that they need their livelihood, and maybe that they also do want to harm the earth. Perhaps they have a negative intention. Maybe they really don't care about global warming. But then the people on the other side would express what they've got to say as well. Maybe that they look down on the coal miners. I'm not even sure. But what I'm trying to get to is the idea that if both sides express their negativity, all of a sudden they would feel a commonality. They would feel a way that they could be closer together and relate because they're able to practice what the guide calls the fine art of communication. Now, the second section of the lecture, I'll keep going with my summary for a little while, and then we'll talk about it. We'll share our perceptions. The second section of the lecture on page 4, it talks about the influx of the Christ consciousness brings more spiritual values and laws to your plane. Many spiritual laws and values are generally known through religions, but few are truly understood and experienced in depth. He talks about the law of brotherhood. Without brotherhood, there is no love. Without love, there is no brotherhood. Love is union. Hate is split, dissension, isolation. Love means mutual understanding. However, for understanding to grow, effort and goodwill are necessary. In other words, love is not something that happens like a miracle. That's what the guide often says. Love is a feeling created by an act of will. So the guides always, you see, that's why it's called the path work, because, you know, the work, you have to do the work of self-finding and the work of putting in the effort to love. And he says, interestingly enough, love, union with God and other people, that's what love is, he says, is the result of communication, and communication is a result of serious effort, a commitment to use your attention and your energies to make yourself understood in the best possible way and to understand the other. For both purposes, you need to empty your mind of all preconceived ideas your lower self has a stake in retaining. You need to put aside enmity and distrust. You need to listen deeply and openly. You need to convince the other of your goodwill for the truth. I mean, I couldn't really read that without thinking about the political discourse these days, you know? And there is so little goodwill, right? I mean, the idea that, do you think the Democrats want to convince the Republicans of their goodwill, or the other way around? Do the Republicans think they need to convince the Democrats of their goodwill for the truth? I don't think so. They both have their position. Of course, you know, I'm a little bit more to the left, but still, I see that the hard-heartedness, lack of willingness to expose any negativity, refusal to take in the other's truth, those things are really palpable. So, of course, he says, do not fear the truth. It will be so liberating. He's talking about, you need to sacrifice your pride, your stubbornness, your pleasure in having a case against someone, or your fear of finding out that you're wrong and bad. Now, those words should be engraved on the floor of the Senate or the House, I think. You need to sacrifice your pride, your stubbornness, your pleasure in having a case against someone, or your fear of finding out that you're wrong and bad. That's anathema, I think, to our political leaders. They really do not want to sacrifice their case, and they enjoy their pleasure in having their case. But the guide says, in order to truly practice the art of communication, you have to put that aside. So, as we do the work, we gradually let in the Christ consciousness. We gradually let what the guide calls the great plan unfold. Even the negativity serves the greater purpose. He again recaps that second point I made earlier on page 6. He says, what may appear an entirely undesirable negative occurrence is in reality a necessity for establishing new values and reestablishing life based on spiritual premises, truth and love. In other words, destructiveness that has advanced so far that it can no longer be changed, molded, or transformed needs to be destroyed before a new and better structure can be erected. Many destructive events on your earth are of this kind. And then a very important concept, you need to learn to distinguish between those events that are outright unnecessary and directly opposed to life, being expressions of evil, and those that fall into the category I just described. It's a very important distinction to make. And we can recall what the guide said about the nature of evil, the characteristics of evil, the numbness, the lack of control, the inertia that we all have. There's a big difference between destruction that creates positively and destruction that doesn't help things move forward. Even though, of course, everything helps everything move forward, which is the big paradox I talked about earlier. So the guide says, this is a nice paragraph here. Many of you already see that new values are springing up all over, working their way laboriously through the thicket of obsolete values, the old negative and destructive attitudes toward life. These new values are still small and delicate plants that need nurturing with courage, with commitment to the larger cause of life, and with the ever necessary self-honesty that fosters development and expansion of individual consciousness. The more people nurture this growth, the stronger the new plants will become on your planet. So change happens in the next section. Change happens slowly with everyone changing their individual consciousnesses and then the group consciousness changing. I'm going to jump now to the section on page 7 where he talks about exposure. And for one of the only times in the lecture, the guide actually talks about politics. And the guide says that we're in a new era because a lot of stuff cannot be covered up anymore, and a lot of things are coming out politically. Now, of course, this was given, I believe, in the 70s.
79, yeah.
79, that was like after Watergate, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, it's still happening, and you got to feel sad a little bit for all these politicians and these oligarchs because they basically can't keep it bottled up. The word's getting out, no matter who you are. I think people are reporting, not only did Edward Snowden like blow the, just blow the lid off all of the secret intelligence gatherings that we're doing, but there were things like the Panama Papers that released all the private dealings of all these wealthy people all over the world. And the guide says, hey, you know, people are not able, things are being exposed now. And I think the guide says that that's part of the influx of the Christ consciousness. Things are being opened up that before were not open and available. So exposure is what I mentioned in that about that Pathwork group that I remember, those groups that we had back in the old days of the Pathwork, where basically the bottom line was people were exposing their shit. I mean, laying it out there. And the reaction to that is actually a wonderful feeling of oneness and unity. When you see somebody's anger, their judgment, their tightly held wrong conclusions and images and prejudices, somebody has the guts to admit that, all of a sudden you see how you feel closeness because the higher self is at work through the negative exposure. All right, so, and the guide summarizes this process on page 8. You expose your lower self, you share it, you communicate it to others. Can you think of a better way to establish love, trust, and closeness? I mean, that seems paradoxical, but it's really so true. And I think that, you know, when politicians go through a redemption cycle, you know, a politician gets up and goes, you know what, I admit it. I had sex with somebody who wasn't my wife, or I was abuser. I beg for forgiveness. I mean, often it's not really that sincere, but it's the same thing. It's like you admit who you are. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous is about, right? I mean, the guide always Eva talked a lot about AA, and AA is similar to the Pathwork in a way that you have to accept who you are, reveal it, share it. And then, of course, people become closer and know and feel kinship with you. He says, but unless exposure is infused with love, it becomes self-defeating. Show respect for the person who has the courage to do it willingly. Those who refuse to open up willingly must not be allowed to destroy their environment and to influence events through their concealment. That's a very important 2 sentences. Show respect for the person who has the courage to do it willingly. Sometimes when somebody does have the courage to do it, he gets dumped on and shunned. And that's not showing respect to the person who has the courage and the guts to reveal who they are. The courage and strength necessary to bring about exposure wherever appropriate and necessary stems from the inner conviction that it is done in the service of a larger cause, in other words, in love. The more you expose yourself to yourself and subsequently to others, the more you will discover your true intrinsic worth. Then he says, it is the same with the planetary entity. The Earth's higher self is conducting all the exposures that occur now on the political front. Interesting, right? Do not think of the New Age as a general vague force. It is a consciousness by and in itself. So the guide is sort of saying that right now, the Earth itself is sort of engaged in a process of, spade turning up what's negative, exposing, bringing things out, letting things into the sunlight and letting things into the fresh air. So the guide says that planet Earth is in some sense going through a similar process as what we are called to do individually. And in the last page, the guide says, the time has come when you can consciously help the outer growth catch up and make it more an expression of your inner reality. Look at this beautiful world with the eyes that see the whole, that comprehend the Lord's working behind all that is. Let your hearts be filled with the freshness of life's healing power that flows from the source that encompasses all that ever was created and ever will be created. He says, you are all surrounded by the great force that flows with such renewed vigor through your universe. And I guess the renewed vigor has to do with the influx of this consciousness, Christ consciousness, at this time in our history. So that's my summary of the lecture. I hope I was clear enough in exploring that Gandhian concept that the higher selves of two entities are always working behind the scenes. But that's a very important thing to take away from the lecture, that no matter what's going on, higher selves are working. And it is possible to find the truth of a situation, not his truth or her truth, but the truth. The truth that is always, the guide says, that two people can never be in conflict. There can never be conflict between two people, because if both are in tune with their higher selves, they will find a unity. They will find a, like my friend Tom Soder, who passed away, who led improv classes, he said improv is about both and. In other words, it's my idea and your idea together makes a truth. So it's not one person's view. You only create a truth when you approach the other person and let that person in. So the two people together create a deeper truth. All right, that's what I'm thinking. I know that in some of our emails, we talked about the meaningfulness of this lecture. And I think, Kate, you wrote something about it, did you not?
Yes.
I did.
All right. Do you want to talk about what you're thinking, your perception?
Sure. I want to say right away that I put the name of a book that I've been studying for the past almost a full year now, and I'll study it from the rest of my life. But it's in the chat. The title is The Ever-Present Origin by Jean Gepsa. It's in the chat if you want to know. It's about the evolution of human consciousness. And I think certainly it's not the only book out there. There's the past 10 years, I think it's beginning to really roll into people's consciousness that the humans are evolving. So in this lecture, he talks about the Christ consciousness, which I also identify with. As a Course in Miracles student, I totally identify with the Christ consciousness. So I found the lecture endearing. That's the stunningly endearing. It touched on a lot of things that I related to. But one that was new to me was what you were emphasizing, Alan, which is that in Course in Miracles, this is not clear. It might be under there, but it's not clear. This is very clear in the lecture, that when two people are arguing, conflicting, fighting even physically, that in reality, this is so important to me, that in reality, my higher consciousness in that fight and somebody else's higher consciousness are really working through with the negativity to make something beautiful.
Everyone froze for a second.
Yeah, everybody's frozen.
They're here. No, they're not even here.
So those two things together were important to me. And so I think that covers me. Thank you.
Yeah. It's complicated, but it's so important. I also love the idea that there's no sequence, really. There's no sequence of hate, anger, arguing, going back and forth, and unity. The unity exists always. And there's really no time in which these things occur. I think maybe at some point the guide might have said that prayer is also something that is instantaneous and happens at the moment it's needed. In other words, if you pray for someone and they need that energy, the prayer is kind of held in a reservoir and communicates in a non-time sensitive way. Anyway, yeah.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
I wonder, and I just wanted to ask more and try to understand. I mean, again, this issue of destruction and conflict.
Can't hear too well. Can't hear too
Let me pass it along.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead.
This is more of a question because I'm challenged by that idea of conflict and how is that included in the good, in a goodness in some ways, and I can understand, the lower self and the higher self, and I do believe in evolution. I do believe that every opportunity or every situation that exists can lead us to a better place. Yet, I'm separating a situation or an event as compared to what do you do with the situation. So I don't think a conflict is good necessarily, but if you use it properly, then you can move to the next step and then create a unity. Just kind of a little bit differentiation, because the conflict itself, if you use it properly, or any situation that is destructive, then, but it's up to us to create that decision. We can take it to, we have a free will to decide right or left, to continue that conflict or not. So I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
You are making yourself clear. You are making yourself clear. I would say that it's a little more nuanced, complicated than that. I mean, right. I mean, what you're saying is that at any moment, you have the ability to make a positive choice, right? You can, as the guide would say, stepping stone or stumbling block, right? Okay. But this is something a little more nuanced, if that's the right word for it. In other words, let's say two people are in a conflict, or let's say someone is beating somebody or hurting somebody. There's something ugly going on. I think that's what the guide's saying, is that if you zoom out, the person who's the aggressor, let's say the person, and obviously creating suffering is evil. We try to reduce suffering, right? That is a commandment, that we try to reduce it. But if somebody's actively creating suffering, then that person has made certain choices to arrive at the point where he is causing somebody else to suffer, where he is aggressive, where he is angry, let's say. And the reason that he arrived at that point is because he had to make those choices in order to develop and grow from what is going to happen. And the person who is being hurt needs to suffer that hurt to transform that hurt and experience and grow from that. Does that make sense?
There is some sense. I mean, I do believe that we have to treat everybody with compassion and love.
Right.
And seeing that, it's all this hurt and pain comes from suffering. Yet at any given moment, we have the choice, but yet we have to again, like, where is the destruction come to place, and where is the destructive to move toward better place, and where is the goodness? Always we have to create that unity. Yet I'm just separating the event itself.
Well,
and the ability of that each of us making that decision what to do with that.
yeah. Like Sadhguru, who I like, says, when you're in a particular moment, the moment is inevitable. In other words, you're here. What's happening is
Yes.
a result of everything that occurred before.
You've done your best.
You cannot change this moment,
Yes.
but you can change the future. But I think the guide says that this moment, inevitable as it might be, was also a creation of your higher self. Because this moment is going to allow a transformation to take place if you make the choice to understand it. In other words, if you make the choice to allow the experience to transform you. What do you think, Tracy? Am I expressing it correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that there aren't any accidents, and what is, and it's meant to be. And even if it's something negative, it's in service of a higher plan and a higher good. So if we can just embrace whatever is happening, because it is. I mean, there's just, you're not going to be able to. You might as well just say okay, because you're not going to change it, and then seek to find, the transformative qualities about it. So if something bad is happening, you want to try it. I mean, that's what we were taught when we were little kids, learn from your mistakes. That was one of the first things I remember being taught in kindergarten, is that it's okay to make a mistake, just learn from it so you don't repeat yourself. But it's pretty much the same concept. It's like, you did it, it happened.
Mhm.
Okay, but there's something good to be had out of it, because you can now learn and you won't
But
do.
if you are in like a
Yeah,
physical,
Tarya?
if you have
Wait.
a physical obligation with someone, I mean, I think that it will take, I don't know, like both people would have to be in some kind of, they would have to have some kind of emotional maturity to be able to, well, maybe this will change or something. I think that people, when they are like full of feelings of hatred or whatever, I don't think that there is a chance where they all of a sudden go to some other place. I think that it's not for everybody.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that people get out of those feelings and go to a different place.
Have to run their course like the virus.
That has to run their course, but they have to people can always make choices. The guide always says we're not victims, and we have the ability to make choices. It kind of reminds me, though, all these pathwork concepts have a huge amount of resonance, like in popular culture. And, like in Star Wars, where Darth Vader is going to kill Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I think he says, well, look, if you strike me down, I will become more powerful than you could ever imagine, right? Now, that's exactly what this is. The negative force is striking, but he's not killing the positive. There's some kind of a liberation and transformation that's taking place there.
Isn't it connected also with the concepts of that we know, that we
What is going on?
that we
Get this out.
Yeah, go ahead, Juan.
yeah. Isn't it connected also with the concept that we all know, that Pathwork is very clear about, that we, here in this earthly plane, we see mostly the effects, but, we don't see the cause of it. You know what I mean? It's because the cause is really hidden underneath. And even though we only see the effect, we suffer, of course, as they are real, even though, the guy keeps telling us it's just an illusion. But we do suffer the pain. It hurts and it's painful. It creates violence. It creates destruction and all that. But underneath, there is causes. There are reasons for this, and we don't see it. And I think it relates to this because the higher self sees the cause. It sees what is causing these, interactions or violence or war or problems that are on the surface. But underneath, there is a cause, and the higher self knows it, and we always use that cause to bring about the right result. I think, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what you're doing here is you're echoing what the guide said about the thing that may appear to be destructive that's really positive.
Right. Yeah.
Something that happens and may appear to be negative, but is actually positive.
But isn't it connected to the concepts that we are discussing?
Oh yeah, I think it's very, very much connected.
Yeah.
Right. In other words,
Mhm.
and the guide makes a distinction between destructive things which occur, which are actually positive, and destructive things which occur, which are not positive.
Can I add? Oh,
Yes, sure, Margaret.
sorry, I just was thinking about the discussion now that that there's a place where the guide says that it's important and right at times to stop a destructiveness, just to like if it's the intention is to be destructive, and to stop it, like in war. In another lecture, the guy talks about war. There's justification for war, and in this case, just stopping the destructiveness, calling it really evil. But what we're talking about, it seems to me, is like if I want to really stop something, say this is wrong, I still do it from my higher self. I still am seeing two things: the suffering of the other person that's behind their destructiveness, their misconception, and also seeing my own negativity that is mirrored, that they're doing that work. Like, oh, what's my own negativity that is like, well, this is a mirror for me. So that really is, life is benign, the higher self is always there, and the person is serving me. But at the same time, to be able to say stop a certain destructiveness that's going on. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
May I?
Sure.
Hi, Farrell.
Farrell.
I look at the lecture, and especially this lecture on communication. There's an assumption that is woven through it, and it's an assumption that I find is made probably more on the part of the reader than the guide, and that is that this communication is a physical, mental, emotional, and most important, interpersonal element to the communication that's being described here. And I really liked your observation about the word work in the Pathwork. There's an expression, there's a field out there beyond our differences. Let's go and meet there. I find that to be so incredibly difficult because I can't turn this off. The thought process is going on that's fueled by my intellect, my personality, my emotions, my humanness, and what the guide is talking about here, using, in my opinion, because it's got to use it. This very, very difficult communication medium of language. I'm shaking my head with reading this, but there's just as many yeah buts going on in my mind as well. And I just have to deal with that. I have to expose myself to myself, that all of this is coming through a screen. Later on in the lecture, and the other thing I superimpose on this is the element of time. Right away I look at 1979, this is 40 years later, and I've got a judgment about that. What's happened? I'm looking at my watch, I'm looking at my calendar. What's happened? What have we done or not done in 40 years? It's hugely detrimental. I'm hugely detrimental to really taking all of this stuff in because I'm still a slave to that notion of time. I'm still a slave to, I've written here in my notes, we're so subject to mass communication as opposed to interpersonal communication because of technology, that it just blows it out of the water for me. And I really, really have to, I said to my beloved Margaret Mary the other day, this notion of be still and know that I am God. And I have been focusing on the be still part of it, not the difficulty of and know that I am God, and don't take I am personally, so on and so forth. And for me to be still, I mean, what came to me, use the word ponder, Alan, I love to ponder. What came to me was stop fighting. Just put the stick down, put the tongue down. And it's really difficult for me. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. As a fellow intellectual, I sympathize. You know, the ego is a terrible beast and it's very dominating. And the ego puts a gigantic burden on the personality because the ego thinks it has to figure everything out and fix everything in a good way, but it's not positive.
Alone also.
You know, and I love that the be still and know that I'm God. And I love the guides meditations where one is asked to raise our consciousness or change our consciousness into a way that's not really perceiving the way the ego perceives things. So amen. And language can be very difficult. I think that's a very good point to make, especially these days when language is being parsed in so many ways and is so obfuscatory and difficult to penetrate. You know, one can never forget, you know, when Bill Clinton was confronted about this allegation of, you know, some sexual misconduct, he said, well, it depends on what the definition of is. Remember that? If you guys remember that, but Google.
You're frozen.
Oh, am I? So you guys are frozen.
You're frozen, Alan.
I'm frozen now.
Something about,
Am I unfrozen? Can you see me? No, they're frozen now.
Yeah, they're frozen.
It's like the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
That's right.
Come
I
back.
said,
Well,
Oh,
I saw
back.
Alan for a moment. There he is.
Yeah.
Are you back, Alan?
He's muted.
You're
Alan's
muted, Alan.
muted.
Can you hear me now?
There you go.
Okay, good.
You stopped at Bill Clinton, went about language
Oh,
and
yeah,
Bill
talking about
Clinton
that,
parsing language.
Bill Clinton, he said it depends on what the definition of is. You guys remember that?
Oh.
Yeah.
The language can really be problematic, right?
spoken like a lawyer, he said that, right?
Right,
Arguing his case.
right. Hey, so Beverly, what's on your mind?
Oh, God, let's see. Well, I really enjoyed the notion of people fighting with each other and then having this big entity superimposed over them, communicating on another level and trying to communicate down to the person. So that's my vision of it, trying to help them unobfuscate the conversation. So that I like that idea a lot. And I had a reaction. Where did I write it? Oh, let me just see my notes. Oh, when they were talking about the resistance to exposure means you have a stake in a rotten structure and living a lie. That was intense. I remember a while back, there was a lecture on evil. So I don't remember the specifics of it, but that's what it kind of brought to mind. Like all the terrible things were like stabbing you, like all the things you do. It's like you do this and you do this. Remember? And then you enumerated all of them.
That's
So
right.
that's what that came. Yeah, that's what came to mind. Let's see, what else? I guess I was just thinking also about communication and how hard it is, you know, because I work with mothers and kids or parents and kids, and people just don't want to hear it. It's just so hard for people.
Wi-Fi. It's Friday night, everybody's on it.
Yeah, everyone's streaming Netflix.
Mhm. No, it's.
Where you have your spectrum? Yeah, right there.
It just can't handle the demand.
Not look like an idiot, basically. You know, you have to admit that you're wrong and admit the parts of you that you don't like, you know, to get through the shame of the quote unquote bad parts of you. Just how hard that is. You know, it's just goes against everything that we're taught. We're taught to try to look good, try to be good, but then we figure out, well, we're not. But what does that even mean? We're not bad, but we still aren't doing good things. You know, it's just all very difficult, very confounding, very confusing. So,
Alan, you're muted.
I mean, that's because we keep losing our connection and it does it by itself. But
Oh, it
that's
does,
why
okay.
the value of, you know, I like the sentence, you have to respect the person that has the ability to do that, to expose themselves. That person has to be given respect. Lots of
Yeah.
times we don't give that person respect, but you know, that's so important that you honor when somebody's being straight up, even if it's messy, difficult. You gotta honor that.
uh-oh,
It's so important.
frozen?
I'm okay now.
Is he frozen?
Mm,
You guys frozen?
frozen again, I think.
What's going on in Manhattan this night? Something not doing well in Manhattan.
Now they're frozen.
Well, is everybody vaccinated? They may have to come in person.
Yeah.
Or not be in meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, we are getting along in the vaccination side.
Try.
Need to sacrifice your pride, your stubbornness. I'm in, I'm ready, but then I have to understand, okay, it's not as easy as, okay, I mean, I'm ready. And those are the things that I'm working on daily, trying to get to those places because I want to get there. I mean, to me, if the guy is saying that it's happening, I want to get there. So
Great.
that's where I am. Yeah.
That's great.
Good for
You
you.
said you were open. That's the main thing.
Yeah, and I'm you know, letting myself more and more and seeing how good that is for me. It's scary at times, but thank God for me. I'm at this point in my life where I have a partner who challenges me every single second of the day. So I'm able to look at myself and to apply what I'm learning and see deep, really transforming episodes that I'm just like, wow, you know. So
Wonderful.
yeah, because I just had to throw myself in there, you know. I had to kind of cast away just that fear, but it's also understanding what that means and what that is, because it's new to me.
Sure.
But it's good. It's good.
Good. Great. Hey, Alan, you're back.
Hi, Alan.
I think hi, Deborah. I think we missed a little bit here about what you were saying. Could I ask you to repeat again what you said? Because some of us here didn't hear all of what you had to say.
I don't know where did you catch me? I'm not sure. I was just telling them how much I love this process, you know, Pathwork, and how I've been able to apply what I'm learning more and more, and also discovering so much in this path on how to work with fear, how to identify fear, on how to do what the guide says. You know, I was telling the group that you know, having to, you know, telling me to sacrifice my pride, my stubbornness. Those are things that I can pinpoint in my personality that serve me as kind of a light bulb you know, you're being stubborn.
Mhm.
Okay. Instead of like, you know, just staying in my stubbornness, you know, I'm letting go. Last night, if I may, something really, truly incredible happened. My partner and I were having a conversation, and we had an encounter with a few kids out there. You know, we're all planting trees all over Ulster County up here in New York. And one of the girls said something. My partner, Amy's Jewish, and she's very sensitive. You know, she says something bad about Jewish or anything related. And there was this girl who said something about Zionism, and I immediately cringed. And I was like, I was praying to God, please don't say the word Jew. But she didn't, but still, Amy picked something up, or at least I perceived she did. So when she brought it up, I immediately got defensive. And I was like, I knew you were gonna get upset. And she didn't even say the word Jew. Like, why can't you, like, you know, why can't you just be happy with people and why can't we just hear them? And I was all up in my, you know, I'm right. And she was like, that's not what I'm trying to tell you. That's not what I was trying to tell you, because she's also doing the pathwork. So I can't get away with anything. And she told me, this is what separates us right here. And I didn't fight that, because she was talking truth to me. I was defensive, and it took me a second to it just got away from me. And then once she told me that, I realized what I was doing, and we didn't fight. You know, I didn't end up sleeping on the couch. And we were able to really transcend a situation where it could have been a horrible fight. And and this is what I'm talking about, like the results that I'm getting from reading, from studying. It's something that I haven't found in any spiritual practice, and I've done them almost all that I have ever encountered. So I'm just really happy to be here. So thank you, Kay, for asking. Thank you guys for listening. Again, thank you, Alan, for letting me share.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank
You
you.
want to say something, Joel? He was about, yes.
Joel,
Joel, yeah, she
take
was
the,
gonna-
hopefully it won't freeze.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. That was such a beautiful example that you gave, relating back to the lecture. And I guess what I was wanting to say was the importance to me of the lecture is to bring it back to ourselves. And I think that some of these global questions about, you know, is evil serving ultimately the good of mankind? That's beyond my capability to comprehend. What I can comprehend is the notion that God is always present and that God is the ultimate force, stronger than evil. But I think that so to me, the fact that it talked about two individuals are in conflict and their higher selves are being served in a positive way, I just want to leave it at that because I find that reassuring. But the intricacies of, you know, if you beat me to a pulp and then later on somehow that's serving my highest good, and it's up to me to get to that, that's going a little too far for me right now. You know what I'm saying? And so I want to bring it back to what the lecture's talking to us as individuals, what I need to do as an individual to be a better human being, to communicate better in relationship with Tracy. And I think, you know, to me, the concept of exposure, that's very difficult. I don't do well in group. But I can expose myself to Tracy because I trust her. I know that she's seen what, you know, my worst sides, and she knows most of my faults, probably too well. So but the idea of exposure being liberating and positive for us. I can see that, but I think that that's a level of development that is very difficult to reach, and it needs to be handled very carefully. And there are lots of different levels of exposure that you know what I'm saying. Our most intimate secrets, that's not necessarily something that we're going to be comfortable with in a group. But I do think that the basic notion of communication, that we express our feelings and our thoughts and try to be clear and really try to listen to other people and understand, come at the communication without prejudging, without formulating an answer while the person's speaking, yes, that really helps to diffuse conflict. Just that respect of really listening to another person when they're talking and they're trying to explain themselves. And particularly, I think, and Alan was talking about this, the acknowledgement, that I hear the pain in what you're saying, I hear the anger, I hear the frustration. Try to connect with the truth, even though it may be upsetting the feelings that are coming towards us, right? Somebody's really angry. It's disturbing, right? And we tend to be reactive. And so to just really try to stay centered and peaceful and embrace what the person is trying to express, that seems to really help. So I guess to summarize, just to bring it back to ourselves, and how does the information help to support us and to support our being in a peaceful and loving place, which is, I think, what we're trying to do. Thanks for listening. I'll give it back to Alan. It's nice to see everybody.
Nice to see you, Joe.
Thank you. Nancy, what are your thoughts? I put you on the spot.
Is she frozen?
I can't hear you.
You're muted, Nancy.
I like the idea of what has been talked about. I know Beverly brought it up, that when two people are in conflict, their higher selves are involved, whether or not they know it, is the way I read it. And the importance of just trying to stay in there. I have so many scripts, pre-written scripts. It's very hard for me to let go of them and to be present. But it's good to know that my higher self is in there when I'm in conflict. And I'm gonna think more about that. And the whole idea that negativity is the way consciousness, resolving negativity is the way consciousness evolves. I find that it's kind of a new perspective. There's a place for negativity. And so that's I think what I want to say. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Nancy.
Question.
Go ahead, sure, Kay.
This might not be appropriate for tonight. Tell me if it's not. But when I was reading the lecture, I was thinking about COVID and how the negativity of this pandemic has been for the whole world. I mean, 1 million people, or close to 1 million, or more than 1 million. So many people dead. And I'm wondering, it may not be appropriate, as I say, it might not be politically correct to say this, but I'm wondering if it's involved with the evolution of human beings, the human evolution. We do feel we have to move to a new level of understanding, working together better, loving each other more. You know, it almost seems to me like this was, it's going to sound bad, but I'm going to say it anyway, like a clearing out of some of our humanity. This really sounds bad. I'm like putting their deaths on, but I'm going to say it because it's in my mind that sometimes evolution or the entity, the guy calls the earth or humanity an entity in its own self. In fact, it even says that about, there's another word in there that says it's a consciousness. Can't get it right now, but I forgot what it is. Oh, anyway, so I was wondering if anybody thinks that I'm absolutely crazy to think that disaster like this, gigantic death, could in any way be a reason because we need it, because we have to move in a larger way.
I was just thinking in response.
Can you please, I didn't hear you.
You said amen.
I was just,
Oh, amen.
Yeah,
I was thinking
amen. Yeah.
Yeah.
response that that in the guide, actually, if you believe as part of lectures that life is eternal, an illusion, it's just sort of an ending of this particular incarnation, then it's not that it's not horrible and sad and people suffer and die and awful and we want to resist it, but that it, that in terms of the evolution of the whole entity, that this is a part, that one's life and death are a part of the mass consciousness evolving.
Yeah, that's certainly something that I think that the guide would, that would be something that truly reflects the spirit of the lectures. I'm always reminded the guide says, meditate on the length of this path, and that we live thousands of incarnations, so that one death means little in the big scheme of things. I think that certainly when historians talk about 2019, they might say that this brought the world much closer together and made certain things possible that weren't possible if this hadn't happened.
Mm-hmm. But I particularly like the fact that there's a reason that we are actually growing. So that the underlying high level positive part is that from this, we are growing to another dimension. Another humanity is becoming broader, deeper, another dimension, moving into the fifth dimension.
Well, I'm struck by when the guy talks about how the technology of communication has made people feel closer together all over the world. Not only communications technology. In other words, now I know that some kid in Syria who got bombed is suffering just like the kid next door. I know that people in Syria are not different from us because of the television.
Yes.
And I know that. And in the same way, I could take an airplane, as the guide says, and I can be in Syria in a day if I want to be. And, the whole thing with COVID is that we've been treated to the spectacle of how this is ravaging people all over the world. And everyone in the world has a common purpose. We're trying to get the vaccine, or we're trying to find immunity. So this is really hammering home the fact that we're really all the same. I think it's kind of interesting because, initially the virus seemed to not really be spreading in India, maybe. Well, they're different. They're not going to get infected, but now they're really getting hammered. So everyone is getting hammered. And of course, in the Chinese people were the first to get hit. But it's a shared suffering that is bringing us closer together.
Mm-hmm.
So even though some people demonize other people, immigrants, this and that, it's difficult to do that, isn't it now? Difficult to demonize or pretend that people in other countries are different than we are.
Yeah, I've had the thought that with all the quarantining and all the you can't do this, can't do that, can't do that, it's like I've had the thought our life is stuck, and yet the territory of love is expanded.
Well, it's a very nice way to put it. And also, I did have a discussion with Amy Fauchuk early in the pandemic, where she said that it's an opportunity for people to go inward and spend time with themselves
Yeah.
and kind of be
Mm-hmm.
not so outer directed. You know, for me, this has been a real blessing because I have not been able to work every day. The company said we only have to go in 1 day a week, but what that meant is that I've got lots of time to care for my mother who broke her hip, who's 99. So I've been spending a lot of time with my mother. So from that point of view, the COVID has been a wonderful thing for my family, just from a very narrow way to look at it. I also think that, you know, so many people died in transit in the union where I work. About 160 people died in the transit system, but many of them had pre-existing health conditions. Many of them were obese, many were older, and of course more men died than women, but in many ways it's a wake-up call to people who do not have healthy lifestyles, whether they're not treating their diabetes or whether they're eating things indiscriminately, they're just unhealthy. So I mean, in some sense it seems cruel to say it, but you know, it's a wake-up call to get yourself healthy, get yourself together, and be in better shape.
All of which are forms of love. That's how I see it. You know, it's not just like take care of your body, be healthy. It's like this is about loving your vessel, your incarnation, you know, your vehicle, and really loving. And what's the truth? Like, can I eat all this shit? I was gonna say sugar, and not, you know, not get diabetes or not get something else. You know, not that it's to blame ourselves, but really seeing cause and effect. And sometimes you can't see it, and sometimes so you don't want to be blaming people. Oh, what did you do wrong that you got sick? But you know, so on the larger eternal picture, what is the positivity and this negativity? Maybe it does just result in you caring more for yourself or for your life.
Yeah. So we have to get out. You know, the guide always says there are no victims. So that's kind of important. We got to take that to heart. That doesn't mean that you can't do something bad to another person, but it does mean that coming from a victim orientation is not really in accordance with Pathwork principles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
Hard to give that up.
I also think COVID brought to light once again the racial inequalities in this country, and I think it's hopefully it will spur some changes in our health system.
That could also be a very positive thing that comes out of this. That's absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's also the piece about intellectual property and how the corporations don't want to give the raw material and the recipe for the vaccine to the poor countries.
Right.
Which is like crazy. They think that the virus is going to stop at the border. So they're not even looking at their own self-interest rather than look at the lives that are going to be lost because of their selfishness. But it's a choice. It's another choice point for people.
Now that I think is an excellent area where communication, true communication, loving communication would benefit both parties. But yeah, that it just completely defies reason, because you know, the poor people that can't get the vaccine are the domestic workers in Qatar and in those countries in Saudi Arabia. They're going to bring the virus back. Right. I mean, not to mention other countries. Yeah, the poor folks are going to, like in Brazil, which of course has more path workers than anywhere else in the world.
Right.
It's really getting.
Wow. Yeah.
I don't think the Brazilian government has made it a priority to vaccinate poor people in the favelas there.
No.
That means that they're all going to get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
there's
so
a lot of
insane.
lessons.
It's so insane. It's so absurd. You can't even conceive of it.
Well, I
They're
think
not-
it points to how deeply embedded our consciousness, our material consciousness,
Yeah.
has devolved, I guess you could call it, where corporations they only look at stockholder value. They don't look at anything else, and it's to their detriment.
Yeah.
It does, as we're saying, it doesn't make any sense, but that is so deeply embedded. And this is only in the last 50 years that this has come about this way. Maybe it was inevitable.
Very true.
And
Well,
I
you
think
look
it has to change.
you look at the environmental movement, and that's the same kind of thing. Corporations have to realize that the environment is something that we all share, and that if you think that your profits outweigh the ability of people to have a decent environment where everyone can enjoy nature and can protect themselves from sea level rise, that kind of thing, it's obviously in everybody's interest. And that's such a process where people have had to kind of grope for understanding about these ideas and get away from the purely selfish profit motive.
I would just make this observation. Actually, it's pertinent to the lecture. not to go against what you just said, Alan, but people don't think it is in everyone's interest. It's not that it's not that we don't think that that's false, but we just don't see it that way. Maybe we go out to our grandchildren and that's it. What happens after that? None of our business. My responsibility is to my immediate family. And talk about exposure. That's something that I think we all have to sit down. I'd love to see some sort of a seminar where everybody says, I don't give a goddamn. It's just, I'm just telling you the truth. I just don't care.
Right.
And see where that takes us.
Right. That is very Pathworkian, I must say. That is exactly what the people in a Pathwork group would say. You have to say what's really in your heart, good or bad. Yeah. That's right. And you admit your own self-interest, but be open to be educated, I suppose.
Sure.
The guy takes this bigger point of view, zooming out, where we all have many lives, and sometimes the victims and the victimizers pursue each other throughout history. That one incarnation, you're a member of the people that are being victimized. Another time, you're a member of the victimizer class. All of it is a unity. So there aren't any families or tribes really that you always belong to. Yeah. But the worst, right. And what sucks is to not admit that. You have to be where you are. You've got to come from where you sincerely are, what you sincerely believe. And I think that that's what a lot of, it's not to use the Republicans in a bad light, but they basically say, look, you guys are hypocrites. You're self-interested. You just won't admit it. My self-interest comes first, and you guys are just not going to admit that that's what you really think. You're trying to put your values on me, but you don't believe that. That kind of thing, right?
Well, in a funny way, Alan, I certainly believe that I put my self-interest away sometimes for others. But at the same time, so often in this head up here, the first thing that comes to mind is me. So, I'll just give you a quick example. Today, I couldn't get a hold of my sister. She went to the cemetery yesterday because a cousin died. And so I knew she was out all day yesterday with her daughter. And today, it's a cold day. She should have been around. So I wanted to know what happened. So I called here, I called there. I left a text message. All of a sudden, it occurred to me, something happened. I can't get in touch. Something bad is going on. And do you know, right after, and there's a little fear under that. And then right after it was, now how am I going to rearrange my life for this meeting tonight? Because I'm thinking my sister's in the hospital. My sister's 93 years old. So she's in the hospital, she might be dying, right? Or she could be dead. But what's the thought that comes to mind? How am I going to rearrange my life? What I got going tomorrow, what I got going tonight with Pathwork? How is it going to affect me? It's a horrible feeling, but it's the ego. The Course says the ego always speaks first, and it's always wrong, which is interesting comment. But catch yourself when it happens. It's disgusting. It's really disgusting.
Stuff like me.
We have
So in a way, I'm not disagreeing with the Republicans. That's where I was coming from.
Be honest, admit your self-interest, right?
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
wonderful.
Wow, but it's you got to know it's there, right? And it's there every time. You can't deny it. Then you can step back.
Yeah, yeah.
Admire your practicality.
Yeah, I guess.
That's a bit of a joke, Kate.
Yeah, well, no, it wasn't. It was disgusting. If I'm not being angry with you at all. Sometimes I come off that way. If practicality looks like that, I don't want it. Thank you. I get what you're saying, though. I get it.
But why is it disgusting? I mean, it is. And that's how people are. So you can make another choice. It's not disgusting. It's just the way people are.
Beverly, it felt disgusting. When I looked at myself.
All right.
Yeah. When I looked at myself at the thought, and I thought of my sister who I care deeply about, and I thought how a moment before I was in fear that something was wrong, just a moment before. But then the fear was directed to me. What am I going to lose? You know?
I get it.
Yeah. But so it was good, in my opinion, it was good for me to feel that and to look at it and say, this is gross. Now it'll come again. I'm not going to say, but maybe I'll just be more aware, just watching. That's all, just looking.
But Kate, I really don't think this is disgusting. I think this is a normal part of being you and be self-love, because yeah, you can love your sister, but we always love ourselves the most. And I think that's just healthy selfishness. I disagree. I have my brother right now. He had an operation, a shoulder replacement, and I love him dearly. He's in New Jersey. Thank God he just sold the house. So he lives with some friends sharing, 2-story building. So I know they're going to take care of him. But my first thought was like, yeah, I would have to go there and live with him. I don't want to do that. I don't want to leave my apartment. I don't want to leave my friends here and go and care for him for 6 months. I didn't think it was disgusting. I think it was healthy selfishness and realistic. It's like
I just want to say it felt
healthy selfishness.
Yeah, Teresa, you weren't feeling it. For me, when I looked at it, when I looked at it, I felt that way. That was a real feeling for me. That's all. It doesn't have to be for you, though. Not at all.
Right, but I'm questioning if that's a positive feeling for you. Maybe that's some image underneath there, because I think healthy selfishness is very healthy and very normal. We all love ourselves the most. It's supposed to be like that. And if you don't love yourself enough, you're useless to other people, because then you can become a doormat and servant, and you spend yourself in service of everybody else and neglect yourself. So I think that, I don't know if this is just not a healthy selfishness. You are thinking about what's valuable for you, about your own life. You were worrying about your sister. I'm sure if something happened, you would be there for her. But why be disgusted that you have needs and you want to fulfill your needs? I think that's healthy selfishness. I think that's healthy and normal. I disagree that this is disgusting.
I'm not sure if Kay didn't want to acknowledge the fact that she had needs. I just feel, Kay, if I'm correct, that what bothered you was how quickly they appeared and how insistent they were. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I like to look at things. I like to see. I want to see it. That's all. I wasn't putting myself down. Well, I was when I said it was when I felt disgusted, but it was a feeling like I don't like this. That's all. And it was very quick. It was immediate. It was at the same time as of caring about my sister. Maybe that's what it was too. I don't know.
And you were exposing, it seems to me, in terms of the lecture, there was an exposure, you want to expose there. Something about yourself that ordinarily we want to not expose and be ashamed of, And the guy says in this lecture something, as a psychotherapist, he was talking about how important a current psychological work is in terms of really looking at oneself. I thought that was really interesting because in current psychology, like the ego is the survival mechanism. The guy talks about the ego, and we're talking about the, primitive brain and the limbic brain, that there's a survival. And of course, part of us immediately goes to surviving. Like, oh, what am I gonna do about tonight? Wasn't like, that's just like an automatic, it's part of being human. And I think what, maybe Teresa's saying is that you have to forgive that and understand, yeah, it is, you are like horrified, like me or you. Either I survive or you survive. Either I survive for me or I survive for you. And that's like, oh, wow, that's not my ideal self, but it's there.
So how's your sister doing? I'm curious.
Guess what? She was at another cemetery all day today in the cold and in the wind because it was her husband's.
Frozen, no.
I think she'd already said her husband's,
Anniversary discussion.
yeah, something like that.
Well, thank God she's well then. That's important.
Text messages. I felt okay with the way I handled the being afraid. So that was actually, it was meant.
He's on his way out. Bye,
So there's
Alan.
two Allens there.
I know, but somebody's muted, Alan. In both of them, you're muted.
He's on the phone and a computer.
Yeah, but they're both no sound.
Yeah.
I don't know if Alan, we can see you, Alan. Do you know that? You're not muted. You're not frozen. Oh, well, I give up. You're not frozen on there. You're not frozen.
Here we go.
there.
You're not frozen, but you're muted.
Can you hear me now? Yeah,
dear.
we're
So
having
hard.
internet connectivity problems here.
Phone a
How
friend.
appropriate since the lecture's about connection.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? It's about communication. And we're
Right, we're having trouble
technology.
doing that.
Well, at least when we have our meditation, nothing will that will not be interrupted.
Alan, I have a question for you. You're in red in this frame, but when we see you in the other frame, you've got a yellow shirt on. I'm wondering, how do you do that?
It's a different guy.
Oh, because in other words, when
Lower self is red.
you're talking about the static image?
No.
I don't know whether it's static. Maybe it is the static image.
Am I wearing a raincoat in that image?
You could be a yellow raincoat.
Yeah, that's the static image.
Okay, but why do we have two frames of you?
Don't ask.
Because he's trying to fix things, Nancy.
He's on the
Okay.
phone and the computer, Nancy.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. So hey, let's see, Moshe, do you want to say something? Are you thinking, Tarya? Is there anything? People are good? All right. Yeah.
Alan, I'm really asking Tracy. Tracy, you enjoyed this lecture. You wrote a little note also to me about it. What was important to you in the lecture?
I think the thing that was most interesting to me was how applicable it was to what's going on today, despite the fact that it was channeled over 40 years ago. And I've been thinking about that. And
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
eerily so, right? It was like,
yes.
And I at some point I stopped. I knew it was old because they're all, and I checked the date. I was like, wow, that's over 40 years ago, even though it was one of the later lectures, next to the end. But still, and the things the guy was saying, just it could have been happening right now.
Well, there really is no time. The guide will say that, and the Course in Miracles says it every other page. There is no, what?
Only time is a mental construction of this plane, but it doesn't otherwise exist, right?
That's exactly right. Science is saying it today. Now science is saying there really isn't any time or space.
No.
Certainly not space.
No.
That's gone. That went out with Einstein. So
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just a mental construction of this kind of plane of existence that we're on right now. So, and I think it's kind of a necessary construction because just on a practical level, like if we didn't have time here, we just waited for us all to randomly show up in this living room and on this, webcam, we'd wait a long time, so it's just a practical necessity for where because we're incarnated now, we're in a physical form. And so that as soon as you have physical formations, you've got space between them or not. And then you've got the time thing comes in too. But
Yeah. But as we evolve, there's something called transparency, which we're going to be dealing with as far as the book that I'm reading, which is in the chat. And the transparency is that we'll begin to see through things.
yes.
So the body, which of course is the strongest thing that we identify with, is the body.
Right.
We may be able to see other people and then ourselves a little more transparent.
Yeah, I think that's inevitable because as we rotate through these spheres of consciousness, I mean, the next sort of thing I think that's going to happen is we're going to be on more subtle spheres where we appear more almost like ghost-like, if you will, and then eventually mental spheres and
Yes.
So
Yes.
but it's just our own because it's just a mental construction. I mean, we it's just the way we see ourselves.
Correct.
So
nothing is fixed.
I don't think anything really exists. I think it's just all coming from our own perceptions and our own mental constructions.
I completely agree.
Yeah. So.
Well, that's quantum physics, really. They know that it's a wave, and then when we look at it, it becomes a particle, and then look at another way. It's a wave.
Exactly.
Well,
exactly.
Where does the notion of creation come into all of this?
Well,
that's a sincere question.
Well, I think the guy does have something to say
Yeah.
about creation. Well, as the guy always says, consciousness creates form, not the other way around.
Right.
So this whole thing was created by consciousness.
Yes.
The guide says.
Right.
And by the way, that book you're reading, Gabe, sir, okay. Matter of
Yes.
fact, I think that the guide actually recommends that book in a lecture.
No, you're
Guide
kidding.
Actually recommends that.
What's the name of it?
Really?
The author is named Gene Gabser, G-E-B.
No, Gebser, Gebser, Gebser.
Well, I think in the German he might say Gabser.
Gabser what?
Ever-present origin, is that the name
Oh,
of it?
well, it's German. You're right.
German.
You're right. It could be Gebser.
But I do.
Yes, it is spectacular, but
the guide
go ahead.
actually recommends a book by him. In all the lectures, that's the only book the guide actually ever recommends, and says it's
I want to know what lecture that
not sure
is.
which one it is. But if you search in the on the Pathwork website, I believe you could just simply do a keyword search, and I think it will come up. And it could be in the questions and answers, but I do remember that.
Okay, I thank you so much for telling me. I've been reading it for a year now or a year and a half. And as I say, I intend to read it for the rest of my life. But it definitely is not an easy book by any means. Very, very European, a lot of history, it goes all the way back to before time began. And it comes all the way up to I think it was published in 1951 or something like that.
Very interesting, because I was actually looking at the book today. This morning in my mom's house, I was looking. I happened to see the book on the bookshelf.
Wow, it's up.
No.
It's up for all of us.
I just bought it. I just bought it. Yeah, I just bought it right now.
Who's that? Oh, wait till you read it. Oh, I'll just quickly say one more thing. I took notes the second time. I'm reading for the third time. The second time I read it, I now have 200 cards, 6x4x6 cards. Not that I'm ever going to study. It's not academic. I didn't do it for academic. I did it because I couldn't understand and I had to write down what I was reading so I could get it. Very, very hard. But it's fabulous. There we go. Enough said. Alan, you actually looked at it today?
Today.
Oh my God. There it is. There it is. It's right in front of us.
Yeah,
So you want me to send it to the group? When I send out?
yeah. Tracy will send a link to the group to everyone to look at the book, order the book.
Oh, here.
Well, but be careful though, really. You're going to get it. One friend of mine, she heard about it. She thought about it. She ran and bought it right away. And now 6 months later, poor thing, I told her, don't do it. You're not going to read it. Wait. Because it's more than 550 pages. The references in it have to be at least 1,000, maybe 1,500 references. I mean, it's a serious book.
Well, I just bought it.
Okay.
Poem.
It's a masterpiece. No, it's well known in the world as a masterpiece. Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm looking forward to reading it.
All right.
All right, friends. Shall we do our meditation?
Yes, please, Ellen.
All right. Let's have it's 8:47. So let's have a meditation until 9 o'clock.
Is that too dark?
That's good. Okay. Let's have a 13-minute meditation.
Okay.
I guess we have a lot to meditate about, right, friends?
Yes. We do.
All right. We want to give thanks for our opportunity to share the love of the Pathwork lectures and to share our insights and to communicate, feel our group consciousness, and dedicate ourselves to more and more exposure. So, thank you.